So let's talk about that toxic personality and what to never do when you are dealing with them. And hey, I just want to say something about this. If you have already done some of these things, do not beat yourself up over it. Okay. Wherever you are now is where you can begin, right? Right now is your jumping off point. And it's never too late unless you actually give up. I just want to kind of say before I get going with this, that if you're sitting there going, oh my God, I already did that, don't beat yourself up over it. You can always make that ground back up. Today is a new day. Okay. So let's talk about this. So the first thing I want you to never do with narcissists is expect them to be loyal to you, because they're only loyal to looking out for number one, and that's themselves, not anybody else in the world. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And I do want to say something else with this. A lot of times in my videos, I'll say, this is why they are like that. This is why they look out for number one. This is why they don't have the ability to, have any care, compassion, or sympathy or empathy for others. And I've heard some of you say, like, oh, you're like defending them. I am not defending them. Let me just make sure that, like, very clear about that. I'm simply helping you to understand the psyche of the personality so that you can stop beating your head against the brick wall. And if you've watched my videos, you also know that I have said, like, beating your head against a brick wall would actually be more satisfying, because at least the brick wall is not actively trying to manipulate you, gaslight you, and take you down, which is what narcissists try to do, especially if they don't think that you're for them anymore. Because remember, with the narcissist, you're either for them or against them. And if you're against them, they see you as public enemy number one, and they want to take you down before you take them down. No matter what they say, even if they have said, I'll always be there for you, I will never let you down. Most of the time, when they say those kinds of things, it's future faking. It's not necessarily because they actually feel that way. It's because they want you to come off of whatever it is that you're trying to hold them accountable for. And if you want to know more about future faking, you can definitely check out my video on that topic. Don't expect loyalty, not from a narcissist. All right. So another thing never to do with narcissists is to explain, justify, or overshare. And what I mean by that is, when you are negotiating with them, when you are emailing with them, when you're texting with them, it's very, very common to want to defend yourself, to want to explain, to want to take everything point by point and go, that's not right, and that's a lie, and how would you say that, and how could you believe that, and how could you say those things knowing all the things I've done for you? And you want to point out all of your contributions and your accomplishments and all the things that you've done for that person. So for you, don't try to justify, explain, or overshare, because you're not going to get anywhere with that. So I stick with just the facts, ma'am or sir. Just respond to the things that you need to respond to, and to the rest of it, you can just say, I deny your allegations. I'm in receipt of your email. I deny your allegations. And here's the one thing that I needed to respond to, and leave it at that. I call it tactical responses. Just never explain, justify, or overshare. The next thing never to do is to expect them to change. I mean, I guess there are stories out there of narcissists who have changed and who have really done the inward work that they need to do. And it's just so rare that if you sit around waiting for that, you're going to be disappointed. And they'll probably be taking advantage of you along the way as they do it. So, especially if you're negotiating with them, you definitely don't want to, like, be taken in by that, because if they act like they've changed, it's probably just a manipulation and a move. Maybe it's a Hoover or a future fake or something like that, in order to try to get you to, be back into their web of control. So don't expect that. So number 4 is Never expect them to take responsibility for their actions. Not really. I mean, if they need to in order to manipulate you, then they might. But for the most part, it's deny, project, and deflect, lie. They'll do that too. They don't want to have to take responsibility for their actions because then that is less of themselves, right? And they don't have a sense of self. It's already very fragile. So by having to take responsibility, they feel like they're being exposed and they don't want that. And if you want to know more about what happens when you expose a narcissist, check out my video on that topic too. And the next one is never to give them ammunition. In other words, don't do things that make it easy for them to make you a target, like get super emotional, get angry. I was just talking to somebody recently where the wife is bipolar and she wasn't on her meds and she was kicking and hitting the husband and pushing him and doing all of these things to him. And as a response, because he was angry, he like broke a table. Well, now she had something on him, right? And so don't give them ammunition. Never, ever, ever do that. And so if you're never going to do these things, I want you to put never in the comments below. And we still have 5 more. Okay. So number 6 is never justify or defend their behavior. Don't make excuses for them. Don't allow yourself to go, well, they had a horrible childhood, or they're really stressed out at work, or whatever it is that's going on with them, because it's never a good excuse to be abusive or abusive to somebody, whether it's physical or emotional or whatever, psychological abuse, whatever form of abuse they're inflicting on other people. It's just never okay. And there's a lot of people out there who've had just the same kinds of horrible things happen to them, and they're not abusive to other people. Never justify or defend their behavior, because that's not good for you and it's not good for them. And it just enables it. So never do that. Number 7 is never get into the mud with them. Once they trigger you, once they're trying to goad you, they're goading you to try to get down into the mud with them. And that's not going to get you anywhere. When you're trying to say you're in a lawsuit and they file something and you file something, and you're back and forth. And now, the only person who benefits from that are the people who are in the system, lawyers and people like that. Otherwise, you guys don't. You never get anywhere with that. So never get into the mud with them. Instead, create strategy and leverage so that you can come out of this thing unscathed, which is what I teach you. So make sure you follow me because of that. Okay. Next is don't ever get sucked in by the Hoover or the love bomb. So when you start to walk away, when you start to create those boundaries and you're saying, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. Now I'm seeing what's going on and I want to get out of this thing, or I want to start handling this in a way that's powerful and productive. That's when they might start to hoover you and they might start to love bomb you and they might start to come back. And I do have videos on both of those topics as well if you want to know more about that. But they're going to come back in and start trying to use all of the charming wiles that they used in order to get you into their little web of control in the first place, and never get sucked into that. All right. And the next one is similar, which is never fall for the future fake. When you're trying to get them to be held accountable for something, or you're not liking their behavior in some way, or they didn't do something they were supposed to do, or they did do something, and they start telling you that things are going to be great and everything's going to be different and you'll see and blah, 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 blah. Whatever, that's the future fake, and never fall for that. And the last thing never to do with narcissists is never put anything in writing that they could possibly use against you as your lawyer. I have to tell you this, joking, but not joking. I mean, seriously, you have to remember that everything you put your hand to is a potential trial exhibit, whether it's in a business situation or a personal or family law situation. Every text, every email, every social media post is a potential trial exhibit. So if you don't want to potentially see it again in a court of law, then do not hit send and do not hit post. Okay.
Okay. So we're going to go through the top 5 mistakes that people make when dealing with narcissists. And I've seen these when people are negotiating with narcissists and also in dealing with them. And I've also made them myself in dealing with the narcissists that I've had to deal with. I had to deal with a couple of covert narcissists in my personal life as well, one in a business setting and one in a family setting. The one I'm saving for last is the reason why I really wanted to make this video. Okay, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so number 1 is do not make the mistake of falling into the trap of their future faking. They will future fake you. They will make you think that they've changed. What happens is you will leave, you will maybe come back, you will think that they have changed. They have not changed. Okay. Do not think that they have changed. Do not fall for that. Do not come into thinking that they may have changed. I have interviewed people on this. I have talked to people on this. You can listen to my interviews on this. You can talk to people on this. Don't think that they have changed. They have not changed. Unfortunately, they just don't. So don't fall for that. That's one of the top 5 mistakes that we make, is falling for the future fake, thinking they may have changed when they have not. Don't fall for it. You know what future faking is, right? It's like things are going to be better now, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like a love bomb, but it's already happened. Like you're already in the relationship. And when you're trying to hold them accountable for something and them saying, oh, things are going to be different now, don't look in the past, look to the future. Don't think that they're going to change. They won't. It's all a manipulation. Okay. Number 2 is don't think that you're going to get closure from them. You're not going to. Okay, just forget about it. I thought that I was going to be able to get closure in my relationship with the business narcissist, and you can't. I thought that I was going to be able to have a nice amicable relationship going forward. You can't. And I've seen people fall prey to this many times as well. And you're just not going to be able to do that. As much as you try to wrap things up in a nice little bow and move forward nicely, they're just not capable. They're just too wounded. And so as much as you think that you're going to try to get that closure, you're going to have to get your own closure. Just knowing that you can move forward, knowing that you are healed, knowing that you are going to be a better person from everything that you're learning from this situation, that's the closure that you're getting. The next big mistake that we make in dealing with narcissists is hoping for acknowledgement from them and thinking that you're going to maybe get acknowledgement for anything that you contributed to the relationship, because you're not going to get it. You're not going to get acknowledgement from them. They're not going to say, oh, yeah, you're right, you did a good job, or oh, yeah, you're right, you contributed to my career, or yeah, you helped me in that situation, or you made my life better in this way. You're not going to get that. They're not going to make it seem like, sure, you get to take credit for anything. In fact, if anything, they're going to make it look like you're the problem. You know, I have a whole video on that, 5 ways that they actually try to make you look like the problem. And you can check out my video on that. So they're definitely not going to give you credit for anything. And so we make this mistake of thinking, try to give me credit for this, try to acknowledge me. And if I could just talk to you one more time, if I could just get you to see, stop banging your head against that wall. Banging your head against a brick wall would actually be more satisfying. So that's the next big, huge mistake. And if you agree with me so far, give me a totally in the comments. All right. And the next one is expecting any kind of loyalty whatsoever. You're not going to get any kind of loyalty. The only loyalty that they have is to the highest bidder for their supply. You know that they need an endless amount of narcissistic supply. you know that they're going to go to wherever the best form of supply is that they can get. And so that's where they're going to go. I mean, they're going to go to wherever they can get it. They're like vultures. So if down the road there is a better form of it, that's where they're heading. I mean, they're not going to have loyalty toward you if there's a better form of supply somewhere else. So you can't take that personally, because it really doesn't have anything to do with you. It only has to do with them. Okay, you ready for the last one? This is really the reason why I wanted to do this video. I was actually going to maybe just do the video on just this topic. I was actually thinking about maybe just doing it on the one big mistake that we make with narcissists. But then I thought, well, there's so many. So I decided I didn't mention the other ones. But this is really one that I see so often in negotiating, that I thought I have to mention this one. Okay. And that is thinking any sort of like this gratuitous giving is going to garner some sort of favor down the road. It doesn't. Okay. So if you think that you're negotiating with them in some way, and that giving them something on the front end is going to get you something on the back end, you're like totally kidding yourself, because it's not. They're just going to take it and like, oh, okay, great. And your point is what? It's like, it's done. They have it and that's it. And now they want more. So what I see a lot of times is people will say, well, I'm going to show them how nice I'm being, because I'll show them I don't want any part of their retirement, or I'll show them that I won't touch this, or I won't ask them for support, or whatever, giving up leverage. And then they just take that, and then they realize down halfway into the case that they're like, it didn't help at all. The narcissist is being horrible and horrendous anyway. And now they've given up that leverage. Now they wish they hadn't been that way. Or they didn't hire the good lawyer, or they didn't get a custody agreement done at the beginning like their lawyer told them to, or whatever it was that they didn't do, because they thought that this gratuitous giving will garner some sort of favor for them down the road. It doesn't. It's a big lie. It's a big fat waste of time. They will not honor agreements. They'll just take, and they will not see that and acknowledge that. And you're just going to end up feeling used and abused. Let me just tell you, if they were a lying, denying, horrible spouse, they're not going to be better during the divorce. And by the way, this goes for if you're breaking up in a business relationship or any kind of a relationship. This is a massive mistake that I see with people, that somehow you think that if you show them how nice you are, that they're going to see that and that you'll be rewarded for that. You won't. Don't fall into that trap. You got to take care of yourself. You got to do what you have to do to end up at fair. And don't feel guilty for that. Do what you have to do to take care of yourself. Do what you have to do to take care of your family if you have kids.
Remember that a narcissist at their core is a person who needs that constant source of narcissistic supply. You're dealing with a person who's internally like starving, desperate, gasping for breath, gasping for air. It's scarcity at its utmost extreme. They're super fragile. They act super strong, but they are energy vampires because they need that external validation at all times. You are that food source for them. They don't care about you. You're a possession to them. So despite their confident exterior, they're actually quite vulnerable
to any sort of perceived criticism, any sort of perceived slight. It's like this glass almost. And any eye roll, any sort of slight of any kind can be that thing that makes them snap. It's called splitting. They instantly go from black to white, good to bad. You are either for them or against them. And if you're against them, you are public enemy number one. So you have to understand that this is the behavior pattern that you are dealing with. And so when you go to negotiate with them, by the way, that's what you are dealing with. And you're dealing with a person who's literally, their brain is like the brain of a toddler. The limbic system part of their brain has an arrested development. And that is the part of the brain that becomes activated when you flip that switch. It's called narcissistic injury. And when that part of the brain becomes activated, that's what you're interacting with. You are not interacting with the prefrontal cortex of the brain. You're not interacting with the part of the brain that is the thinking, cognitive part of the brain that is rational. When you're dealing with that, you have to remember that they're going to become sulky, they're going to become irate, they're going to become pouty, they're going to have a tantrum. If somebody else is stealing the spotlight, if somebody else said something that they don't like, if you interrupt them, they have a problem with all of that. And so they're going to use these methods to control you, to dominate you. They might say things that, you're the only one that thinks that. That is incorrect. You are misremembering. You're trying to manipulate the situation. They're trying to get you to be back under control. They're so desperate to get things back under control because they're just so out of control at that moment. A person who knows who they are, who authentically knows who they are, who authentically stands in their own power, doesn't act this way. You are dealing with a toddler, basically. That's what toddlers do. You take their drink away, they flip out. How do you deal with that? How do you interact with that? Well, the first thing you have to understand is you have to start looking at it as if you are observing them. You have to take yourself out of that situation. Preserve your mental space, preserve your emotional energy, set clear limits on that. Define what behaviors you're going to accept. If a narcissist is frequently making demeaning jokes at your expense, you can just say, I don't appreciate those jokes. Set boundaries. I would say step 1, don't run. Step 2, make a U-turn. Step 3, break free. So what are you doing to turn that around, to course correct this situation? How are you starting to course correct? Setting clear limits, starting to look at that situation as if you are a third party, taking yourself out of it. I can see that you're upset. I'm observing that. They say something really, really awful. You're wearing lipstick. You look like a whore. You don't have to even say a thing. That doesn't mean that you're never going to wear that lipstick again. You don't need to say another word. Number 2 is stay grounded in reality. What is real? What is your what if? What is your evidence in reality? Keeping a clear sense of reality helps counter the effects of gaslighting, of the what ifs. So for example, if they say they never said anything hurtful, but you know that they did. If they say that never happened, you can keep a journal as a personal reference. And they're going to sneer at you. Why do you have to keep journals? Why do you have to do that? Let them sneer. Let them say the things that they're going to say. They don't want you to have control of any sort. Just stay grounded in reality. You know what's true. You know what's not. And if you're finding this helpful so far, put "so helpful" in the comments. So helpful, because you are starting to create your narrative instead of theirs. Next is don't feed their ego. Unless you're doing it for your own benefit. I have this thing called fluff or favor, vomit later, which, you're going to fluff up their ego to get something that you want out of it. Don't do it unless you have to. So don't continue to give them more and more and more supply by continuing to be with them or allowing them to, condition you, unless you're doing it for strategic purposes. Don't lead them on. You have your strategy, your leverage, you're anticipating, you know where you're going, that S, L, A, and Y. So once you have your strategy and you know where you're going with this thing, you follow your plan. If you want to get started, go to winmynegotiation.com and get started with my Crush My Negotiation Prep Worksheet. Go to winmynegotiation.com and get started. Literally help thousands and thousands of people. Limited emotional engagement. I say you start to set even soul distance. Even if you can't distance yourself and you're still in the same house, you start soul distancing. Engaging emotionally, especially in confrontations, you can lead to exhaustion, but you can start to know what's true, what's not. You're starting to shut yourself off emotionally. You can't trust them, but that's okay. I can see what's happening here. You can just start acknowledging. So if they use a past mistake, they start bringing up something from 15 years ago, because you brought up something that happened today, you can just say, I acknowledged that mistake. I learned from it. We moved on. Let's focus on the current issue. Don't allow them to take that ammunition from 15 years ago to manipulate what's going on today. The next thing is seeking support. Make sure that you have the support and guidance and help that you need. So, I have a support group in my Facebook group, Narcissist Negotiators with Rebecca Zung. Make sure you join that. And I also have a sponsor on this channel, BetterHelp. Go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung for therapy. If you need access to therapy, it is a sponsor on our channel. So we receive commissions. It doesn't cost you any extra. We just want you to have access to the help and support that you need. Navigating a relationship with a narcissist is challenging at best. It's soul-sucking and draining and emotionally traumatizing at worst. And so you are going to need the help and guidance and support of a lot of different resources. Therapy, people who love you, people who support you. So seeking external perspectives can help you and provide that validation and grounding that you are going to need. So getting your army of people of light and help and support, people who are going to love you, is going to be so important. Crucial, really. Even what not to do, don't expect them to change. They're not going to change. They're going to continue to love bomb you and pretend like they're going to change. Without professional intervention, it's going to be completely in vain. And they're going to pretend to be empathetic. They are not. They don't care about anybody but themselves. Don't try to have confrontations with them. Don't try to make them care about you or admit that they did wrong or admit all the things that you did for them. All of these things, none of it's getting you anywhere. It's just going to lead to blow-ups. You need to be strategic in where you're going with this. You need to address concerns in a way that's strategic, tactical, and have a plan. And never, ever, ever compromise your self-worth. I always say, here's what's negotiable: contracts, issues, terms. It's not negotiable: your self-worth, your self-esteem, who you are. Remember that. And remember that you're going to need self-care. You're going to need to take care of yourself. You're going to need to have things that you can pivot your mind to, things that you can make sure that you are looking at to take care of yourself worth, yourself, your well-being, painstaking steps to have those boundaries.
Today, we're going to be talking about, those narcissists. All right. So the first thing is over aggressiveness. They get like overly aggressive, overly defensive. At their core, narcissists feel totally and completely empty inside, even though they might act like a big bully. They think they know what they're doing. They always say, I feel good about myself. I feel great. I know what's going on. At their core, deep down inside, they may have pushed it all down. They may, act like they're all that or whatever, but they tie their sense of self-worth to their sense of superiority, their sense of control. And when they sense that this superiority, their sense of control is under threat, they react, they trigger, they get overly aggressive, overly defensive. And to reestablish that dominance, that presence, that ego is fragile. And when that gets threatened, they get even more dominant. They get even more crazy. They almost have like a tantrum. It's like out of control sometimes. And that's why you can sense like they start actually making mistakes. And I've seen this in negotiations where they actually start almost overreaching, almost asking for more things than they should. If somebody, let's say in a team meeting at work, say a colleague supports an alternative approach to the one supported by the narcissist, and instead of considering it, if that narcissist senses that somebody is not on their side, that they think should be on their side, they can snap at that. That's not going to work. And we've tried that before. Or, aren't you paying attention? Like once they know or feel like somebody is not on their side, not supporting them, they can get extremely defensive about that. Because with a narcissist, you're either for them or against them. That's it. They don't trust them. They got to have your full undying support, or that's it. And then suddenly they're the victim. When you're trying to bring up something that you're unhappy about, now suddenly they become the victim. They're very, very good at becoming the victim. They have to retort with something that you did that's so much worse and make so much noise about you and let everybody know how much worse you are. That's when they feel like they're losing control because they have to make so much more noise about you. That's another sign that they feel like they're losing control. Number 2 is manipulation and diversion tactics. So one of the hallmarks of narcissistic behavior is masterful manipulation. They artfully divert attention, twist narratives, and evade responsibility, making you second guess your perspective. If they're caught in a lie, instead of admitting it, they shift the conversation saying, you always misunderstand me. If you had listened better, you would have understood what I was saying. You didn't hear me. That's not what I said. You misunderstood the conversation. And you didn't misunderstand the conversation. You didn't mishear it, but they say that you misheard what was said. Another one is if they feel cornered, they'll divert. Remember that time that you messed up. You always do that. That's something that you always do. And instead of taking responsibility for what they're doing right then and there, divert attention away from what you're trying to say. Lie and deny, project and deflect. Number 3 is need for validation and reassurance. So beneath their exterior of unyielding confidence, many narcissists harbor an insatiable need for validation. It's always goes this direction. They have this fragile self-image. They're closing this minor deal, maybe, at work or something, but they're flaunting it around as if, they brokered world peace, but they need to seek affirmative compliments from everybody around. Like, did you see how I handled that? I'm so good at this. I have a knack for this. Don't you think? I handled this so well. They might drop comments hoping to receive compliments like, I don't know if I did that well in that presentation, getting people to go, oh my God, you did great. You were amazing. If you guys have seen this, give me a totally in the comments so far. Give me examples of the things that you guys have seen of any of these that I've told you about so far as well. And by the way, in my new book, I have all of these things. So make sure you check out my new book, Slay the Bully, slaythebullybook.com. Go to slaythebullybook.com, get it. I have all of these things in there. So make sure you get that, slaythebullybook.com, because in there right now, I'm also offering a free masterclass, a free workbook. So make sure you go there and get that. And if you're watching this video before September 30th, make sure you join me at my free launch, slaythebullylaunch.com, because we're like having a massive party and I'm going to be doing so many amazing things there too. So make sure you sign up for that also. Okay, number 4 is avoidance or complete withdrawal. So when they can't shape the narrative and they feel like they're going to be exposed, they may just, completely just avoid you. They may just stop talking to you. You know how they do that ghosting thing, right? And it might just be sort of a punishment thing too, where they just decide, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you at all, because they think that you're going to come after them. They think that you're going to be so sorry that you try to treat them badly, because you know how they do that push-pull thing, that hot, cold thing, hot, cold, hot, cold. Let's say you present them with a really solid offer and a negotiation, you send over a letter or whatever it is, and you want an answer. Well, they just won't answer. And sometimes they do this sort of gaslighting thing, like, will you please send over an offer? Please send over an offer. And you're like, I sent over one. And they act like you didn't. It's like this crazy making thing. Or sometimes if you talk to them in a personal relationship about undeniable evidence of their wrongdoings, they just resort to complete silent treatment and they just stop talking to you completely. Like, I can't talk to you anymore. And they just walk away. So I'm going to give you 6 things to avoid here. And then at the end, I'm going to give you the number 1 thing to avoid. Okay. So 6 things to avoid. And then I'm going to give you the number 1 thing to absolutely avoid, the mother load of things to avoid, the hairiest thing to avoid of all. All right. Because let me tell you, when you are dealing with narcissists, toxic people, there actually are a number of things to avoid. All right. So I'm going to help you out here for sure. There's just so many times that it's like you're dealing with a landmine when it comes to narcissists. All right. And I know because I've dealt with them in my personal life as well. And that's why I'm on this mission. I'm on this crusade. I've been recognized as one of the top attorneys in the United States. I've written a couple of best-selling books, but I'm here giving you free advice every single day because I want you to have the information in your hands. So if you want that too, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell as well. And by the way, if you're looking for ways to disarm that narcissist, free phrases, free responses, how to respond, you don't know how to put it into emails, you don't know how to put it into text messages, you don't know what to say, I've got those responses for you. Just go to disarmthenarc.com, I've got those free phrases for you, disarmthenarc.com. All right, so number 1, don't try to change their mind. Don't try to change their mind. All right, because you're never going to do that. Once they get it in their mind that they are going to do something, then that's it. You might be able to change their mind in other ways, but if you head on try to change it, they're going to dig their heels in and be super, super stubborn. To change a narcissist's mind, you've got to kind of plant seeds and sort of let them kind of come to their own conclusions and let them sort of think that it was their idea. You can't head on let them think that you're changing their mind, because if you do, they'll never ever change it. So number 1, that's one thing. And I'm working my way up to the mother load thing to avoid when talking to a narcissist or a negative person. All right, the second thing to avoid is don't ever try to get them to acknowledge anything you ever did for them or, your accomplishments or anything like that, because they're never going to do that. They will never acknowledge that. And by the way, if you are negotiating with a narcissist, don't think that early on you are generous and say, you know what? I'm going to give them this thing, I'm going to throw in this thing that I know that they want, or I know is something that I'm entitled to, but I'm going to give it to them because then they'll see how generous I am. And then everything's going to get resolved earlier because they're going to see how nice I am, how generous I am. They don't. They either, number one, think that they're entitled to it. So they're like, no, you're not being generous. That was mine to begin with, or I was entitled to that to begin with. Or number two, they just take it. They basically just throw it to the side and just go, "Yeah, and your point is what? I want more." They don't ever go, "Yeah, you did this thing," or "Yeah, that's great what you did for that." They just don't. They don't acknowledge you. They don't see what you've done for them. It doesn't become kind of like, this chip that you did early on, this great sort of generosity accomplishment that you got early on. It doesn't happen like that, unfortunately. So don't think that you're going to do that early on and get some kind of goodwill for it. Okay. So that's the second thing. The third thing that you want to avoid when you are talking to a narcissist or a super negative person is thinking that you're going to get closure. A lot of people just want that closure. They want that bow that tied up. Hey, we had a great thing. Let's wish each other well. Let's know that it was all good. And, going forward, let's be on good terms and all those things. That's what I thought when I was wrapping things up with a person in my life that I had a business relationship with. I thought that I could do that and leave it all on good terms and have some kind of closure with it, talk it through. It doesn't work that way with narcissists. They're not capable of it. No matter what you do, even if they wanted to end the relationship, they still end up taking it personally, that you were okay with it, that you're walking away from it. Even if you didn't want to walk away from it, they still end up looking at you as an enemy, no matter what. If you're not for them, then you're against them. You're not going to get that closure. You're still going to end up being public enemy number one. It's not going to feel fair. It's still going to be awful. You're not going to get that. So don't think that. Avoid talking to them about that. Avoid thinking that you're going to get that nice little neat bow at the end of that. Just avoid that conversation. Avoid trying to have that closure conversation, because you're not going to get the thing that you think that you're going to. And in fact, you're going to end up hurting yourself more than anything, because whatever you say or do will end up being used against you no matter what, because they will end up saying and twisting things that you do. Okay. So, which leads me to the next thing, which is don't argue with them, because when you argue with them, then you will end up getting into that quicksand with them. And, that's exactly what they want you to do when you argue with them. Now you're getting into the thick of it. And, I remember, some of the narcissists that I've known, they'd be like, yeah, now we're getting into it. Now we're having a conversation. They actually enjoy that. They get off on it, they get a high on it, and you are out of your realm. Because especially if you are, an empath, and you think that you are going to get to a resolution, you think that you are covering ground, you think that you are getting to an end point. You are not. They are trying to just keep you spinning your wheels. They're just, yanking your chain, spinning your yarn, and it ends up costing you money, costing you time, costing you energy, your mental health, your soul, the whole thing. You are just arguing with them and they're just getting narcissistic supply out of the deal. You're going nowhere. So that is just one of those things that you really need to avoid. And by the way, I've gone through 4 things so far. I still haven't gotten to the number 1 thing that you need to avoid, by the way. Okay. These are just other things that you need to avoid. There's still not even the number 1 thing that you need to avoid. Have you figured out what the number 1 thing is yet? Haven't even gotten to it yet. These are all just other things that you need to avoid. All right. The next thing that you need to avoid, which is still not the number 1 thing, but is a 5th thing that you need to avoid, is definitely avoid defending yourself. Do not defend yourself. Do not go, I didn't do that. That's not me. Are you kidding me? You think that I did that? What are you saying? I'm not a horrible person with money. I don't steal. I'm not a child molester. I don't do. What are you saying? How can you accuse me of that? Those are the kinds of things that narcissists want you to say. I don't beat children. I don't do, I'm not a horrible mother or a deadbeat dad. Those are the kinds of things that narcissists want you to say. They want you to get into it with them, right? They want you to say those things because that is where they get you down into it again, right? Arguing with it. They pull you into that quicksand. They pull you into that mud, right? They start going down into it. Oh, you bought a dog that was a designer poodle or a designer this or that. And you're like, what? I got the dog at the pound and I can prove it. And then there you are defending yourself. Don't go down the path. Don't do it. When you defend yourself, you're agreeing that there is an issue. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is say, I deny what you're saying. No, there's no merit to what you are saying. There's so much more merit in short things. Never explain, justify, or overshare. Just the facts. Stay strong. And I want you to put that in the comments right now. Stay strong. Stay strong. You can do it. And by the way, still haven't gotten to number 1. Still haven't gotten to number 1, which is what I'm going to do right now. Are you ready for number 1? The number 1 thing to avoid when talking to a narcissist or a negative person, the number 1 thing, which I've kind of alluded to here so far, but I haven't actually come out and said it yet. The number 1 thing to avoid when talking to a narcissist is do not take their bait. Do not take their bait because they're going to give you a lot of it. They're going to pull it out and they're going to reel you in like that. Like you are some kind of fish on their hook. And then there you are coming in like that. And like they hooked you like a fish. Okay. And dealing with a narcissist is like getting arrested. Like everything you say or do is going to end up being used against you, right? And you don't want to have to deal with that. And this is whether you're dealing with it in a case, a court case, or any kind of situation. It can be any kind of a negotiation or anything. So that by the end of this video, you're going to know how to not be sucked in, drawn in, pulled into that mud and become completely non-reactive to that narcissist. You're going to be like, I see you and I'm not reacting to you anymore. So, we're just going to put that invisible shield down around you. You're going to be like with the Superman chest with the bullets just like coming off of you. Wonder Woman with the bracelets, like with the bullets just coming right off of you, and you're just going to be completely non-reactive when it comes to that narcissist just hurling that stuff at you. And it's really, really important, because when they are at you, you know, they use those things against you in court. They use it against you in negotiations. They use it against you in many different ways. Plus, they get narcissistic supply out of it. So there's a lot of different reasons that you want to make sure that you're not using or you're not allowing them to suck you into that mud. So if you're new here, welcome. If you're just joining me again, welcome back. If you are new, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because we are building a community, and it allows us to continue to build our community. And by the way, I have new videos here every single day. You do want to make sure that you are becoming part of a community, because they do try to isolate you on a regular basis, and it messes with your head, and you can't think straight. You can't, you know, move clearly, and it destabilizes you, right? So the first thing is, don't buy into the gaslighting. Know what your truth is. You can start keeping journals. You can start keeping documentation. Have a notes phone on your app. Start keeping track of what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're saying. Know what your truth is. So if somebody then says to you, that didn't happen, that's not what it, you know, the conversation was that took place, you can say, you know, that is not what happened. That is not how it went down. You know, what they will do is they'll say things like, well, we talked about that. That's, that wasn't the conversation. You know, you agreed. And, you know, you can just know what your truth is. And, you know, you can just, well, no, that's not what we agreed to. Here's what we agreed to. And you can just, you know, you don't have to explain, you don't have to justify, you can just respond back with facts. And you don't have to say it in any other way other than here's how it went. Respond with facts. Respond with facts. You don't defend yourself, you don't explain, you don't justify, you just respond with facts. Know your truth. That's why you keep track with documentation. You know, and don't try to chase every single dog that barks. You don't defend yourself, right? You just pick the things out that you need to respond to and respond to those, and that's it. You know, if it's true, you respond to it. If it's not, you don't. And that's it. Only respond to the things that you need to respond to. Period. End of story. You never defend yourself. You never explain, you never justify, you never overshare. There are times that you don't even need to respond at all. Those are the things that you can weigh out. But I think that, you know, if you can just kind of withhold and stop yourself from feeling like you need to defend yourself on every point, that will help you, because there is a power in less is more. When they go after you, they will go after you for all the things that they know are your Achilles heel. You know, if they know that being really, really good with money is something that you pride yourself on, then they will say, you're terrible with money. That's the thing that they'll say. If they know that being super ethical is the thing that's the important thing to you, they'll go around telling everybody that you're really unethical. That's the thing they'll say, because that's what they want to do. They want to trigger you. So don't take that bait. Do not take that bait. You've got to stay away from feeling the need to go down the path. Okay? So that's number one. Know your truth. Know your truth, and don't respond, because it gives them supply. Remember, don't give them that satisfaction. Make sure you're documenting everything. Document. Have a notes file on your phone if that's all you need to do. You know, and in my Slay program, I have a whole section on the 12 most important areas to document. All right. So, and, you know, if you want more information on what the best areas are to document, you can actually get a free chart from me. Just download it. Go to docthenarc.com. docthenarc.com and get a free chart from me. docthenarc.com and get a free chart on the areas that you want to start documenting. All right, that will help you get started. Just start to look at things as if you're an observer. Just being like, oh, I see you, you know, looks like I see, you know, you're a toddler having a tantrum on the floor. Oh, there you are. I see that you are upset. I can see that. I can see that, you know, we might need to have a conversation later because it seems like, you know, you're angry, you know, almost like, you know, when a toddler's having a tantrum on the floor, you don't get down there on the floor and scream with them. You're just like, oh, you know, you're upset, you know, so observe, don't absorb. Observe, don't absorb. Remember that phrase, observe, don't absorb. I want you to write that in the comments below so that you can start to remember. Observe, don't absorb, right? You can do this. You can do this. Observe, don't absorb. That will help you. You know, like you can just, I see you. I see you. I'm watching you. I see you. And I'm not with you. I'm just looking at you. Okay? A great place to start. So the next one is never leave your thoughts unsupervised. It's such a great thing that I learned how to do a while ago. It's still like a work in progress for me sometimes, but you know, I try not to allow myself too much free time with my thoughts because my thoughts will go running wild down the road into, you know, massive bad places. So I try to make sure that if I am, you know, walking my dog or doing my dishes or, you know, in a place where I'm by myself and I'm not physically working or talking to people, you know, I am then doing something where I'm, you know, listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook so that the good positive things are coming into my brain and allowing myself good things, because good vibrations in means good vibrations out. So it will help you as well. You know, it's a constant process. It's a constant battle. I want to just briefly talk about your 5 Ds because I think that these are so good.
Yeah. Yep. So it's the 5 Ds in a relationship, but it's not, these 5 Ds can apply to any relationship.
Yeah.
It can apply to a work relationship.
Yeah.
And the first one is distort.
So these are the 5 Ds that are negative forces in a relationship.
Yep. So distort. That D, what does it do? It tells lies. It plants negative thoughts in you, right? It makes you think negative things. So the thing that I always say, and so let's apply it to your relationship. You could think, oh, you know, he doesn't love me anymore. He doesn't think I'm pretty. Well, that's distortion, right? Those are lies. It's the lies that you're just listening to negative lies. And so speak truth to the lies, right? The minute you start hearing those kind of things coming in, speak truth. Just, you know, I literally, the minute I do that, sometimes I even verbally go, stop. And I'll say something positive to myself, or I'll think a positive thought. Does that make sense? So you've got to.
We are meaning making machines, right?
Yeah.
We make things mean things that don't mean that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, so yeah, that's a big one. So distortion in a relationship in any relationship is not good. And the next one is discourage. Okay. So your distortions can turn into discouragement. Oh, I'm not good enough for him. Like, so you start to play this thing in your mind. I'm not worthy. So no, then you need to turn it around, encourage yourself, again, encourage your partner. So it may be that it's your partner. Like I said, he wanted to come in. I wanted to cut him down and discourage him, but instead I encouraged him. So you've got to turn that one around. So first D's distort, second D's discourage, and the third one is doubt, right? So lies and discouragement lead to doubt yourself, to doubt God's plan for you, to doubt your direction, to doubt the love that your partner might have for you. So the way to counter doubt is through trust. So when John had shared with me that he, had done this infidelity, at that point, I can continue to doubt. The minute he was going out, I could have doubted him. But for me, I knew that I had to trust. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying trust without something to back it up. They need to give you something to trust, right? But just make sure it's not things you're kind of just, coming up with in your own head. And the fourth D is distract. And this is such a big one because think about it. If you are busy or your partner's busy, say you're busy doing all the things that you need to do to take care of your household or take care of the kids or make money, and you're feeling, kind of unappreciated. And all of a sudden somebody kind of comes into your life that tells you how wonderful you are, how, it's a distraction. Or, a lot of times for men, and women, it can be pornography. It can be pornography, something that distracts you and just seems shiny and bright, and distraction from your relationship. You need to be careful of that because, that there's that whole saying, if the devil doesn't make you busy, and you're right. If the devil doesn't make you bad, he'll make you busy. So it's a distraction. Mm-hmm. And then the fifth one is divide. And that divide, if it's in a relationship or in a marriage, I should say, the divide means divorce. And so you have to guard yourself against those 5 Ds. And so it's about counteracting each one of them. And the divide, again, if you two are connected as a couple, you can really negate a lot of that. It's when you're not united. Again, it's when you're doing the I and not the we. So those are the 5 Ds.
Right. And again, we stress, obviously, if you are in an abusive relationship, if you are in a situation where your partner is a narcissist.
Right.
And not willing to change. And being verbally or emotionally abusive to you, then clearly and not willing to be a we.
Right. And in that case, then you need to walk away from the relationship. And I'm not one to say, leave the relationship, but there are deal breakers. And exactly what you just named, those are deal breakers. If they're not willing to change, if they're not willing to look at themselves, if they're not willing to be honest, right? That's huge. Here's an example. And it can be, you come up with your own guidelines, but say your partner has cheated on you or has shown that they've been distracted. Maybe for building trust, you can look at their phone. Now, some people might think that's a violation, but you know what? If that's something that you two negotiate and say, you know what, it just would make me feel better until I can trust you. One of the things that John did do, I got to tell you, I persecuted him. And rightly so. I mean, I was so hurt and I felt very, very deceived, right? So when John really he was working towards being in the relationship and being a good partner, I was allowed to look at his phone whenever I wanted to, and I, hand it over. And now some people might feel like, oh, well, that's a vibe, that in itself. For me, it was very important. It was very important for me to look and see what was going on because I needed to build that trust. So, your partner has to be willing to do, and, you have to negotiate those together.
Yeah.
Depending on what they are.
And so what does that mean for you? And one of the things that I like is that you have this list of things like what is, a perfect partner for you. And I think that that's an important thing for people. Okay, if they're not going to stay in this relationship, what does that look like going forward? And in some ways it's sort of a manifestation exercise.
Yeah. I always say I did my best relationship work when I was not in a relationship. So, I mean, I dated some real winners before I met John. And wow, I dated an incredible narcissist. He was a piece of work, but I mean, he brought me to my knees. I mean, there was a lot of pain and a lot of crying, but I was able to work on myself a lot. And I think that's why when John started exhibiting these behaviors, I didn't cave and I didn't fold and I didn't go down, because I saw it for what it was. And I had done enough work on myself where I'm like, hey, that's not okay. This behavior is not okay. And I'm having to teach my daughter that, she actually got into a relationship with a narcissist. And I watched as he started to look better and do better. The more she kept feeding into him, this guy ended up it was amazing to see the transformation in him. And it was sickening to see the transformation in my daughter. She absolutely did not look like herself. She didn't act like herself. It was a really sad thing. It was almost like he sucked the lifeblood out of her, so
yeah, I saw it in my daughter as well.
Yeah. So you have to be careful of that. So you should always be working on yourself. And yeah, listen, make a list of what's important to you in a relationship and pay attention. Some of this is really basic, right? But we forget because we get so taken back by maybe the good looks or the charisma. It's the same thing that I tell my kids, when they were going to school. I used to say, if you are in a group of people or you're with somebody and you walk away and you don't feel good, they're not your people. They're not your people. So you always have to pay attention to that. Yeah. So it's very important to do the work on yourself when you're not in a relationship.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to say is stop trying to make not your people your people.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and so you have the 4 C's, which I love for, if you don't have it in your current relationship, then I think it's totally a deal breaker. And, this is something that you definitely want in your next relationship. So talk about that. And I think that that's like a good way for us to wrap up.
Okay. So the first of the 4 C's is communicate. I've said it a couple times in this interview. I'm going to say it again. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Where there's a void in negativity, where there's a void in communication, negativity will fill it. So I always like to encourage couples to find a time that works for you. So I knew with my husband, right when he was walking in the door, was not a good time to try to communicate with him. So find your sweet spot. And I've had to find that with my kids. What's the best time to talk to them where they really open up to me? So communicate. One of the things you can do as a couple, ask your spouse or ask your partner, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I communicate? And what would make it a 10? Right? That's an easy one. So the next C is connect. And you have to communicate to connect. And again, that sounds like an obvious one, but think about it. When you get really busy with work and with kids and, maybe starting a new business, whatever it is, you don't take as much time to connect. So try to find a time that works for you all to connect. Now, one of the things that I did with my husband is we would take a walk. And I got to tell you, sometimes these walks, we would fight. But by the end of the walk, we ended up working out a lot. So sometimes it's just about that movement and the talking that we were able to talk a lot. And one of the things that I highly recommend that people do with their family is a family meeting. Once a week, we would get together with our children and sit around the table. And I'm going to tell you something, it was not easy. There were times we'd go family, or John would say family meeting, or maybe I would start it depending. And, the eyes would roll and everybody had to put their phones down. But Rebecca, I'm going to tell you something. It was fascinating to me. John or I would bring something to the table to read. A lot of times it might be maybe scripture or an article that somebody had written. And it never failed that something one of us was going through, we wouldn't know the kids were experiencing. This article would just open up the channels for us to have a conversation. And it made our family dynamic and our connection with each other so strong. We became such a stronger family. The only regret that I have about family meetings is I didn't start soon enough. So even if it's just you and your spouse or your mate, do it. So that's communicate, connect, and the next one is commit. Commit to your relationship. Commit to work on it. Commit to, and it could be little things. So, there's been a study that the strongest relationships are when each of the partners take time to listen to their spouse or help them with something. And I'm talking little things. So John might be writing an article and he might call me into his office and say, hey, can you just read this real quick? And I'm going to tell you something. Last thing I want to do is sit down at that moment and read through his article. But I know it's important to him. And so I'll take that 5 minutes to sit and read the article and give my input. So it's committing to the relationship. It might mean going to a company party with your spouse when you really have no desire to hang out with the work, the work people. So commit to your relationship. And then the last one is care. Show you care. Isn't it funny how a lot of times in relationship, our spouse is like the last one we give the love to. And we kind of talked about that in the 5 Ds too, but showing that you care about them, that you care about the relationship. So, and that's the whole it's we, not me. So right. Those are the 4 C's: communicate, connect, commit, and care. And those apply to not just intimate relationships. Again, can apply to work relationships, any of that.
Friendships.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.